Did you know? There was potentially going to be a third Prince of Persia game directed by the series' creator, Jordan Mechner. The ending of Prince of Persia 2, The Shadow and the Flame, hints at a new villain who watched the prince's progress through a crystal ball. However, after the development of Mechner's next game, The Last Express, Prince of Persia publisher Broderbund was acquired by The Learning Company. A new sequel began development, but with Mechner taking a less involved role as a consultant to the infamously and critically panned Prince of Persia 3D, and the new villain hinted at during the cliffhanger of Shadow and the Flame was never referenced again. The original Prince of Persia released in 1989 on the Apple II and wowed players with its smooth rotoscoped animation. This was achieved by Mechner filming his brother doing acrobatic maneuvers outdoors in white clothing. He would then use the footage as a reference to create the game's various jumping, running, and fighting animations. Mechner also used some of his favorite movies as a visual reference, such as 1938's The Adventures of Robin Hood. Despite the game being a tremendous amount of work for a one-man team, Mechner wanted the original package to be more ambitious and laments cutting out a full level editor. In an interview with Retro Gamer, Mechner said, "Part of my original plan for Prince of Persia was to include the level editor on the disc, so players could create their own Prince of Persia levels, as Broderbund had done with Lode Runner just a few years earlier. I spent months creating a fully featured, user-friendly level editor, but in the end, the only person who got to enjoy using it was me." While the sprite design of the prince purposely kept his appearance simple, the various home ports of the original Prince of Persia changed his look significantly. This was because the ports were made by different developers from different cultures, several of which were Japanese teams. Most notably, the PC Engine port added a turban and a more Aladdin-like vest to his design, a choice that Mechner liked, as the design was adopted for Prince of Persia 2. The other Japanese-developed ports of Prince of Persia achieved a plethora of additional content, gameplay tweaks, and some questionable creative decisions. While the Sega Genesis port is mostly a faithful adaptation, the Super Nintendo version contained several more levels, an increased time limit, and completely redrawn graphics and cutscenes. One of Prince of Persia's more unusual ports is the Sega CD version, which included animated cutscenes and even voice acting. Ubisoft would ultimately acquire the rights to Prince of Persia and reboot the franchise with the critically acclaimed Sands of Time. Although Sands of Time is very robust, many of its ideas were left on the cutting room floor. The game has a level revolving around a private zoo crawling with sand creatures, but oddly, the only animals that appear are vultures and beetles. According to producer Yanis Millet in a Gamma Sutra post-mortem article, this section of the game was planned to have enemies such as sand tigers and other mythical creatures. However, these more complicated beast-like enemies would have been too cost-inefficient to implement and had to be cut before release. Much of the core team that worked on Sands of Time had extensive backgrounds working on titles for a younger audience, and according to director Patrice Désilets, this inspired one of the game's most famous mechanics. While working on Donald Duck Goin' Quackers, Patrice proposed that instead of having to replay an entire level once the player dies, they should be able to rewind time and resume the game just before death. This idea was dismissed at the time, but once Patrice was promoted to a director, this was one of the early gameplay hooks for Prince of Persia that evolved into the central mechanic of Sands of Time and has become synonymous with the franchise ever since. While the third game in Ubisoft's trilogy would be released in 2005 as Prince of Persia The Two Thrones, there was actually an early prototype shown at E3 of the same year known as Kindred Blades, or simply Prince of Persia 3. While it shared some elements with Thrones, it had a variety of differences, including a less linear city to explore, more blood and gore, and various other changes. Most notably, both the prince and his evil doppelganger had different designs than what would appear in the final game, with the Dark Prince featuring striking white hair. The transformation process between the two forms was different as well, with the prince having to burn himself with fire, with the pain acting as a trigger into his more powerful alter ego. After finishing the Sands of Time, Patrice Désilets wanted to take the franchise in a different direction. He then instead pitched a concept called Prince of Persia Assassins. This game would have seen the player assume the role of a member of the prince's entourage instead of the prince himself, with a backstory rooted in a real-world group called the Assassins. Ubisoft rejected this idea because it was a little too different from the Prince of Persia formula, but they did see potential in the pitch, however, and moved Patrice to his own team. This idea spun off into its own IP for next-generation hardware called Assassin's Creed. The Prince of Persia franchise has fallen victim to various information and media leaks over the years. One notable instance was Prince of Persia 0 having a multitude of character art leaked at the start of 2008, which lessened the impact of its reveal 4 months later. Then in 2012, a screenshot appeared on Ubisoft's forums labeled Pop02, which appeared to hint at a new unannounced sequel taking place in ancient Egypt. This was later discovered to be another project altogether called Osiris, which never had an official announcement before it was quietly cancelled. Although that project was put aside, Ubisoft did return to an ancient Egyptian setting with Assassin's Creed Origins 5 years later. Then in 2013, screenshots for another project labeled Character Action Platformer 2013 appeared on the website for developer Climax Studios. Due to the aesthetic of the title, many speculated that the game was a new installment in the Prince of Persia franchise. Climax Studio CEO Simon Gardner quickly responded to the speculation, explaining that the screenshots were indeed from a prototype they made for Ubisoft, but this never really went any further. Gardner never mentioned Prince of Persia by name. Interestingly, Climax released the first in the Assassin's Creed Chronicles series in 2015, which happened to have very similar graphics and gameplay to those leaked screenshots. In 2004, Pirates of the Caribbean producer Jerry Bruckheimer acquired the film rights to the Prince of Persia franchise for Disney. Mechner had previously considered making an animated adaptation of the series, but couldn't refuse Bruckheimer and Disney's offer. Mechner was also hired to write the story for the film, which was then adapted into a screenplay by other writers. Though the prince was unnamed in all of the games, Mechner gave him the name Dastan for the film. He came across the name in a passage in Ferdowsi's Shahnameh while researching for the script. The passage read, "I have named you Dastan, the trickster, and from now on you will be known by this name." Mechner liked this name so much that he decided to give the prince a name for the first time in 20 years. On the first day that Jordan Mechner met with Jake Gyllenhaal, the lead actor for the film adaptation, Gyllenhaal informed Mechner of another meaning of the name. In Persian, Dastan can also mean story, which Mechner felt was even more appropriate for the character and the narrative. Mechner was given an executive producer credit and got to fulfill his dream of working on a major motion picture. And while it received mixed reviews for a number of years, it was the most successful video game movie of all time, bringing in an estimated $335 million until it was dethroned by the Angry Birds and Warcraft movies. Did you also know that all assassination targets in Assassin's Creed 1 through 3 are real people that are killed at accurate times and places? For more facts, check out the DidYouKnowGaming video on Assassin's Creed. And if you enjoy these Prince of Persia facts, be sure to head on over to my side channel, the McMuscles Flophouse, and check out the first episode of Palace of Persia, where I retrospect through the entire series. Even the Harem Adventures game for flip-top phones. It's really creepy.